Today, we are going to start off with my friend, Kevin Karschnik. Kevin is a keynote speaker, an entrepreneur, and author who helps business professionals with the skills and practices that they need to be successful in today's complex and competitive business climate. And Kevin knows that these days we are handling greater workloads and balancing the demands of career and family, and the ability to stay positive, to manage our emotions and work under pressure are key to workplace success. As I mentioned, I got to see him a couple of weeks ago do his thing, and I am sure you will feel the same way about him that I felt when I saw him a couple of weeks ago. So ladies and gentlemen, today as our spotlight speaker, please welcome Kevin Karshner. Kevin.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Well, I started studying the power of positivity 19 years ago when I had to get a kidney transplant. And I learned from my doctor that your attitude plays an important role in the success of the surgery and, most importantly, the outcome. 94% of patients, if they had a more optimistic outlook, had better results in their recovery. So when I sold my company last year, I owned a company called iSpeak for 21 years. And after I sold, choosing my topic for my keynotes was easy. I was going to focus on positivity. Every single day, we have on average 6,200 thoughts. This is from the Queen's University research. And I want you to think about how many of those thoughts are negative in nature. I call these things ants, A-N-T-S, ants, automatic negative thoughts. And our job, in order to have a positive mindset, is to really understand what is happening. We have to read those negative thoughts. We have to recognize what's happening and then be able to respond accordingly. Not always easy to do. But when those negative thoughts pop in, I'm just always thinking I've got to squash those ants. My daughter, who is 20 years old, goes to the University of Texas, always has test anxiety. And I have to remind her, honey, squash those ants, those automatic negative thoughts. You can't go into the test with a negative attitude about what the outcome could be. You've got to go in with that positive attitude. So ants are what we're going to be talking about. But we've got bad news. We, as humans, have a tendency to focus more on the negative than the positive. It's called a negativity bias. Now, let me give you an example. I'm sure all of us at some point, I think we've all been entrepreneurs our whole life, you've had a performance review. I want you to think about a performance review you've had where, or how even after a speaking event or after a training event, and you get some feedback. So in any of those situations that you can relate to, you get 10 pieces of feedback. You start flipping through your evaluations after a class. 9 of them are awesome. I mean, great facilitator, really engaged, high energy. And then you get to that one that gave you low scores and didn't have any comments. That might be one that always kind of bothers me, because then I'm like, well, what did they not like about it? If I got a low score, but they didn't put any comments. And then I start letting my mind go to the absolute worst places of why they didn't leave a comment. Or maybe in that performance review, you get that area for improvement. What do you fixate on after that performance review? What do you fixate on after that workshop or after that keynote when somebody says everything was great, but, and there's always that but, we fixate on that negative thing. It's called negativity bias. And we do it because of our ancestors. When our ancestors were out trying to find food, which is a positive thing, they had to avoid deadly obstacles. And so it was more important for them to be aware of deadly obstacles and be more aware of predators that were going to be out there. That was all the negative stuff. They had to be on high alert for it before they could get to the positive of finding food. So it's hardwired into us. We'll talk more about that here in a minute on your brain. But the author of the book, one of my favorite books called The How of Happiness, Sonia Lyubomirsky, found that 50% of our happiness is genetics. Now, that could be good or bad, depending on how you were raised and your family. 10% of our happiness comes from our circumstances. So you might be in a good circumstance. So 60% of our happiness, 50% genetics, maybe you're in a good place. Maybe you've got a good family, good genes. 10%, you might be in a good place. But here's my favorite part of her research. 40% of our happiness is up to us. Deliberate efforts, intentional activities that we can do. And so as we think about that, I want to be focusing on good things that we can do. Now, let me give you some more good news on that. There's something called the medical school syndrome, and we've all done it. In medical school, the medical school students are studying all these diseases, and guess what? They start to get the symptoms of these diseases. We've done it when we've Googled all of the symptoms we're feeling when we're sick. I've got a fever, I've got a sore throat. We type all that in, and all of a sudden we realize we've got this deadly disease. Have we done that before? Anybody else? Or is it just me? And it's called a medical school syndrome. And you start to get what you read about. Well, here's the positive of it. When you start reading about positive things, you start to have positive results, and you start to see these positive things happen in your life as well. So we're going to focus on that. So what I'm going to share with you are some happy habits that I've been researching for many, many years. My favorite, and I'm going to start with, comes from Sonia Lyubomirsky from her book, The How of Happiness. She found that there is a 42% increase in our happiness by simply being grateful. Now, thinking about the things that you're grateful for. And if you could list 3 things every single day that you're grateful for, then you start to increase your happiness. So what I started to do, and I started many years ago, and I'll talk more about journaling in a minute. I always struggled with it. I always struggle with journaling, but now starting with 3 things that I'm grateful for, that works. A second part of that is acts of kindness. What she found was that if we can do intentional acts, now I didn't say random acts of kindness, they're intentional acts of kindness that we're going to do 5 times in a week for 6 weeks. But here's the trick. You can't scatter it. It's not 5 things scattered throughout a week. It's all focused on a single day. Now, doesn't mean you can't do other positive things on other days, but focus on 5 positive things on a day. Do some others on some other days as well. Keep it going. It's a habit that you're going to start to build, and you're going to start to see that ripple effect go through the rest of your life. Now, I didn't realize these 6 minutes just really fly by, so I'm going to wrap up. There's so many things and these happy habits that I could go through, but I want to go back to the journaling for just a second. And I talked about the gratefulness and the 3 good things that you could document, which you'll see an increase in your happiness. But I've always struggled with my journal, and I'll end on that. And there's 2 things I want to give you some structure on if you've tried it and you've struggled. One of them is putting some structure around what I call pies, P-I-E-S. Everybody likes pies. Thinking about the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the social and or spiritual, if that's okay with you. The pies, now I had some structure to talk about. because I didn't know. I was staring at this blank piece of paper and I wasn't sure what to write. So pies was really helpful for me. The other piece of that was 3 things that I also write in addition to my 3 grateful was, what am I going to focus on today? It's my morning gratitude journal. What am I going to focus on today? What am I grateful for today? And what am I going to let go of today? Those were 3 questions that I answer every morning in my morning journal as part of my morning ritual. So there's so many happy habits that I love to share with people. It's been a part of my life for 19 years, and it's now the focus of my life as I get to travel around, do these virtual sessions, and do some in-person sessions, teaching people about the power of positivity. Thanks for your time today.
All right. Thank you, Kevin Karschnik. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Hey, Kevin, what was the E?
Emotional.
Emotional. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, Rick, you warned me that 6 minutes was going to go by fast, and it went by way, way faster than I thought.
Hey, but you know what? Thank you for being here today. And I have to give Kevin some props. So again, I saw him in action in person, and he captivated the room, and every single person in that room was actively engaged in everything that Kevin had to say. And Kevin, you introduced the concept of ants. And what was really funny, it's kind of like once you think there's one, you feel it, kind of the negativity bias. I walked away from your session, Kevin, and I realized that I've got ants all over the place. And one of the happy habits that I'm trying to build now, based on what you were talking about, is just reversing that. So every time I catch that negative, that ant in my brain, I'm like, okay, reverse that into gratitude. How can I change that? So thank you for having that impact on me.